Hey folks, welcome to part 7, setting up your vSphere environment. This is all in that series of working around your VMware Workstation 17, building a nested lab. Today's agenda, we're going to be powering everything on, setting up the VCSA, and creating our cluster. Part 7, as you can see here on our list, is where we're at today. Soon we'll be doing part 8, which will be setting up our ESA cluster, and then finally wrapping this series up with some performance testing. Man, we've got a lot done in the last part, six different parts, right? But today we're really focused on getting vSphere 8 established with the VCSA, and then also establishing the cluster. We're going to be focusing on our VCSA server, which is this 10.0.10.223 server. We're also going to be in on the Active Directory server, making sure it's working. And then, of course, looking at our 3 ESA servers down below, making sure they're operational. To do that, we're going to power all the systems on in a specific order, and that's good to understand. We're going to ensure our services such as NTP, DNS, network connectivity, and everything else are operational. Okay, we're going to add our license keys, or at least show where to add them at. We're going to create a data center and a cluster. We're going to add hosts to that cluster. We're going to validate the ESXi host NTP settings and other NTP settings, and suppress shell and SSH warnings. Whew, that's a lot. Well, with that, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is powering on the VMs. Now that you've established your Active Directory controller, VCSA, and your 3 ESA or ESXi servers are ready to go, you're going to power these on properly. The first thing I usually do is I power on my Active Directory controller first. This establishes the core services such as Active Directory, NTP, DHCP, and the RAS server that we've set up in the previous parts. Once it's ready to go, then the next thing I do is I power on the VCSA server, followed by my 3 ESXi hosts. Once they're all powered on and ready to go, then we'll be able to take the next step. Shutting them down is a similar pattern as well. For example, once the ESXi hosts have been placed in maintenance mode, they can be shut down first, followed by the VCSA, and then finally the Active Directory controller can be shut down. Powering on this system is as simple as clicking on a system. You can either right click and go to power and say startup guest, or you can just simply click on its menu right here and choose power on this virtual machine. I'm going to go ahead and let this one get powered on, and it might take a little bit longer because it's a vCenter server VM. Once it's done, then I'm going to do the same for my 3 ESA servers, and we will be ready to begin. Okay, with everything powered on and ready to go, the first thing I like to do is start in the Active Directory controller and just make sure all my services are up and running. In fact, that's probably a really good step before you power on other VMs, is just come into the Server Manager dashboard and make sure everything is in the green. Occasionally you might see some services like this one right here that might be red. There might be a little number here, and that's usually because the service has on a delayed start. Simply clicking the refresh button will refresh this, but what I'm looking for is all green. That means all my services are up and running and I'm ready to take the next step. So one of the things I like to do is just go through and just when I'm first setting up a system is just make sure DNS is functioning properly. I mean, the main reasons I see systems fail is because either DNS, NTP, or basic network connectivity has not been established, and folks have moved forward in their builds without checking these root things first. It's always critical to do that. So what I like to do is just go through and ping each of the host names. Like here, we're doing a ping of the VCSA 223. It's good. ESA 101, 102, and 103 are all pinging through properly like I thought they should. With that established, it was that easy, right? That established now, let's take the next step and move into checking on our VCSA server. So we're going to go into the appliance mode, which is that 5480 port right here. So you go into the fully qualified domain name 5480, and you can get some information. I'm also looking for this. Is this ready to go? Everything's in good condition. That's what I want to see. I also want to come down here and check time again, and just make sure that that time seems to be very synchronized with what I'm getting down here. Because again, below is my Active Directory controller time. Here's the time on the VCSA server. Once that's in order, right, I can double check my network settings. I think everything is good there. There's nothing else to check. I'm done with the server management and I'm ready to move into working with the VCSA server. Now, probably the first thing you should do when you're getting this set up is take care of your licenses, manage licenses. So let's go in there. Now, you can click on that pop-up that they have here. In fact, there's probably another one here as well, saying there's new updates. That's great. We're going to stay with where we're at. But manage licenses is probably the most important. You can also go in through the vSphere client up here, go into administration, then choose licenses, and you'll get the same thing. So what you want to do is you want to add your licenses here. Pretty simple process. Just add each one on a new row, choose next until you're done, ready to complete. You'll be good to go. Your license will pop up in this area here, and then it's just a matter of synchronizing, or assigning licenses to assets. So when I click on assets, you'll see the different assets you have, such as vCenter server systems, different hosts, vSAN clusters, etc. So once I establish like my vSAN license and my host license, this is where I would come in here. I'd click on hosts, I'd say assign license. The license would allow me to apply it to a host, and I'll be good to go. I'm going to go ahead and add those licenses in. Of course, I can't show the entire process because I can't get out my keys, but the licenses will be established, and then we'll take the next step. All right, let's go ahead and start making our new cluster. So we're going to right-click, say New Data Center. We'll just call this Nested ESA Data Center. Okay. Once that's been established, we should see it pop up here. There it is. Now we can go ahead and say new cluster if we want. We can just call this nested cluster. And for now, we're not going to turn on any services. I have found trying to configure and add these together at the same time doesn't seem to work very well in nested, so I try to do it after the fact and kind of manually. It seems to have a better result. Okay, we don't need to manage with a single image. Turn that off is fine. Next and finish. Can always be turned on at a later point. So now we've got our data center and our cluster. Okay. Now all we need to do is go in and add our hosts. So let's add those one at a time. Sorry, we're going to go right there. Add host. We can use our fully qualified domain name. Root user and our password. Should go out and find it. It'll find the certificate. Choose yes. There it is. Next. We can assign a license to it and choose one. Okay. Don't need lockdown mode. Shows the VM location, which is fine. Okay. And ready to complete. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add the other two, and then we'll pick it right back up. All right, now that we've got our 3 ESA hosts added into vCenter server, now all we need to do is just move them into the cluster. Now it's pretty simple. You just click on the host you want to work with, drag it into the cluster, and it will start adding it. If we look at recent tasks, we'll start to see that it's moving it over and taking care of it. Okay, so let's move the next one in. And it goes. Move host into cluster. Okay, completed. And one more time. So now all 3 of our hosts are in the cluster, and we're ready to take the next step, which would be configuring a couple simple cluster items. All right, you may have noticed when we were deploying or moving the hosts into the cluster that you might have noticed it saying something about deploying OVF template. What you're seeing are the VCLS VMs start to power on and get going as we're moving VMs into the cluster. They'll be necessary for DRS functionality and things of that nature, but now they're powered on and ready to go. It's a normal function of moving these VMs into it. Next thing we probably want to do is just double check these servers, these 3 guys right here, and just make sure that they're getting proper time. Again, that's critical for things to communicate on the network. It's probably something we should have done before we moved them in. Not super critical, but it's something we should double check and just make sure that we're getting a good time. So yeah, you can see right here, it's up to date, 3:58, we're good to go. Okay, let's check number 2. Time looks good. And number 3, the time looks good. All right, even though they look like they're synchronizing well, you might notice a setting here. It says that there's no service. So let's go into the direct console user interface and double check that. So we'll go to 103. This is one of the things I love about Workstation. It's really quick to switch between items, whether they're up top here or on the side. I can just switch over to a new item, and there we go. So let's go ahead and log in here, and let's check our time settings real quick, just to double check. Okay. Now we're going to go down to configure manage network, and let's just check it all out. Our network adapters are good, of course. No VLAN. Here's our IP4 configuration. It's good. No worries there. Let's check our DNS configuration. Once again, looking good. Okay, so let's go ahead and exit out here. Everything appears to be where we'd expect it to be. So let's go ahead and exit out. I don't see any issues here, and I'm sure the other two are the same. You can double check those if you want, just making sure their IP information and every DNS is all set up properly. Let's switch back over to VCSA. Okay, and let's set up the time. So we're going to want to go in and add a service. Okay, we want the NTP protocol. We type in our NTP server. Okay, let's grab it. Copy it in. We're ready to go. Give this a second. Okay, let's go to 102, 103, and get these set up. All right, so now our three hosts should be able to get the network time from this service that we've established here, and that's exactly where we want them to be, is making sure their time is all in sync. Now, being that they're an ESX, these are workstation VMs, right? They're probably synchronizing locally, which is fine, but we just want to make sure they're really synchronizing in our environment. We want to make sure our VCSA server and all our other servers all have that time protocol set up properly and they're working well. So let's just, once again, like we said, that's why we went in here and double check to make sure that it's getting NTP time. Everybody's got the same time. We're in really good shape now to move forward to the next step. All right, you may have noticed that 102 and 101 both have this little yellow warning symbol, but 103 doesn't. So let's take a quick peek at that and see what's going on. Oh, okay, we can see where the shell has been enabled on these, and SSH has been enabled for these two. So it's kind of warning us, saying, hey, you know, are you aware of this? So what we want to do is we can suppress the warning so it won't bother us again. And for a workstation environment like this or a home lab environment like this, that's perfectly fine to suppress these warnings. No big deal. And that way they're not bothering us and popping up later. We'll probably want to go into 103 and just make sure that it's suppressed as well and isn't doing that. So that's as simple as going into the user console interface again. We're going to go in with F2 and log in. We're going to go down to troubleshooting options and enable the shell and enable SSH. And now this server is the same as the other ones. Okay, we're out. Back over. Eventually it's probably going to warn us and we'll have to do that. And there it is. So let's go ahead and turn this off. Suppress the warning. And we're done. And folks, that's what we had for you today, is just the basic setup of the VCSA server and ensuring everything's ready to go. In the next video, we're actually going to go through and we're going to establish our vSAN ESA cluster. And once that's established, then we'll be ready to install HCI Workbench and do a quick load test. And we'll be wrapping up this series. Thank you so much, everyone. I do hope you have a great day. And don't forget to hit subscribe.